Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Thursday, the 29th of January. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, big tech earnings reveal more massive spending on artificial intelligence as return on investment fears persist.
Gold hits yet another record high, soaring above $5,500 an ounce, fueled by a weaker dollar.
Plus, seeking more sophisticated ties, Keir Starmer meets Xi Jinping in Beijing as UK-China relations thaw.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The world's largest tech firms are showing no signs of easing up on AI spending as earnings reveal plans worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Meta alone has ambitions to spend as much as $135 billion this year as Microsoft, Samsung and Tesla also ratchet up capital expenditure. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the cash is needed to front-load computing capacity, and the company is already seeing a payoff in the way AI is being used internally.
I think that 2026 is going to be the year that AI starts to dramatically change the way that we work. As we navigate this, our North Star is building the best place for individuals to make a massive impact. So to do this, we're investing in AI native tooling so individuals at Meta can get more done. We're elevating individual contributors and flattening teams. We're starting to see projects that used to require big teams now be accomplished by a single very talented person.
Mark Zuckerberg speaking there on Meta's earnings call as the firm's better than expected sales outlook helped to ease market concerns over record spending. Meta's shares jumped almost 7% in after-hours trading.
Despite those gains, doubts are persisting among some investors that firms can recoup their massive AI outlay. Shares in Microsoft dropped in after-hours trading as the software giant announced a 66% increase in capital expenditure for the second quarter. The higher-than-expected spend of more than $37 billion came as the firm also announced a slowdown in cloud services growth. But Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella says that he expects AI expenditure to deliver for the firm.
We are in the beginning phases of AI diffusion and its broad GDP impact. Our TAM will grow substantially across every layer of the tech stack as this diffusion accelerates and spreads. In fact, even in this early innings, we have built an AI business that is larger than some of our biggest franchises that took decades to build.
Satya Nadella was speaking as Microsoft's total sales increased by 17% to $81 billion during the quarter. Meanwhile, The Information is reporting that Microsoft, Nvidia and Amazon are in discussions to invest as much as $60 billion in OpenAI as part of a major new funding round. This as analysts are increasingly warning of a potential AI bubble forming, in part because of the circular nature of some investments.
Gold has surged to a new record above $5,500 an ounce as a lack of liquidity helped to accelerate a 9-day rally. The price of bullion has soared again once this week, fueled by a weaker dollar and investor flight from sovereign bonds and currencies. The move higher came as traders looked beyond the Fed's decision to hold rates on Wednesday. BlackRock's Rick Ryder, an advocate for more aggressive rate cuts, has emerged as a top contender to replace Jerome Powell as Fed chair later this year. That's been driving a ramping up of bets on a dovish policy shift from the US central bank, which has helped to fuel the record-breaking rally in commodities as gold, copper and silver all hit new highs.
Now we have some breaking news this hour. Deutsche Bank has announced a €1 billion share buyback as it reported pre-tax profits of just over €2 billion for the fourth quarter. That figure came in ahead of expectations as revenue from fixed income trading at the bank also beat estimates at €2 billion. The results come less than 24 hours after Deutsche Bank's offices were raided by German authorities as part of a money laundering probe looking at past dealings by staff with firms linked to Roman Abramovich. The news had driven the bank's share price lower. It closed down 2%.
Europe's biggest software company, SAP, has forecast cloud revenue will grow in 2026 as customers shift from older technology. The German firm expects cloud revenue in constant currencies to grow at least 23% this year and announced a share buyback of as much as 10 billion euros through the end of 2027. The emergence of artificial intelligence-powered tools has fueled concerns about enterprise software companies, even as SAP has been pivoting away from selling software licenses to a cloud subscription model. SAP, run by CEO Christian Klein, is still Germany's most valuable company, but the stock is down 30% since its all-time high last February.
Now, let's turn to some geopolitics. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called for a more sophisticated relationship with China during an historic visit to the country. Speaking during a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping this morning, Starmer also called for meaningful dialogue on areas of disagreement. Peter Burnett, Chief Executive of the China-Britain Business Council, says firms are hoping for more favourable conditions following the talks.
I think if we can move to less friction in services more generally, greater market access, because services is a big component of the UK economy. It's been recognised in the 15th five-year plan as a growth area for China. So there's a very natural combination of the two, if you like.
Peter Burnett speaking there from Beijing. Starmer is the first British Prime Minister in 8 years to visit China as part of a broader charm offensive designed to reset relations frozen since 2018 over alleged human rights abuses and other issues. China's official Xinhua news agency has hailed the event as a pivotal moment while urging the UK to adopt policies free from external influence.
US President Donald Trump has warned Iran that time is running out to make a nuclear deal with the United States. In a social media post yesterday, Trump said a fleet of American ships ordered to the region is ready to fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. The latest remarks come after repeated threats from the White House to launch another attack over Iran over recent crackdowns on domestic protests rather than nuclear activities. Iran's mission to the United Nations said it's ready for dialogue but will respond like never before if pushed.
Those are our top stories for you this morning. So in terms of the markets right now, the dollar is declining again today. So we're down by 0.25% on the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, despite the supportive comments from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Gold, copper and silver have hit all-time highs. Gold is up some 28% this month alone. Treasury's down amid concerns about the rising commodity prices that they could add to inflation. US and European stock futures are looking a bit more positive. So US Stocks 50 futures up by 0.2%, 0.4 higher for the NASDAQ futures. India's stock market is seeing a major rout with a warning about a market downgrade. And we're getting loads of earnings. So you heard a bit about Deutsche Bank, Nokia, ING, and this week is very much ramping up in terms of earnings.
Well, in a moment, we'll bring you more on what some of the world's biggest tech companies have been saying about their spending on AI, plus what Keir Starmer means by wanting more sophisticated ties with China. But another story that caught our eye this morning, how much is the air above your home worth? Sarah Rappaport from Bloomberg Pursuits has been writing about the growing phenomenon in London of developers buying up the airspace above buildings to build penthouses on top of existing structures. Is this some sort of Frankenstein monster building being created in various parts of London?
Yeah, look, it's only the fanciest parts of London. That's the bottom line. The building has to be in the right position, in the right location. But yes, I'm seeing it increasingly. The thing is that often buildings are owned by lots of different people, and sometimes people who live in the buildings are worried that, you know, they don't end up getting what the developers might promise, who profits from it and so on. And I guess London is also are sometimes a bit worried about the city getting taller and taller. Yeah,
I mean, look, the other side of this is that London needs more housing. So is this easier than demolishing a load of buildings and trying to build a shiny new apartment block? Is there a way that it can be done where it can be in keeping with the, I suppose, existing character of streets, as so many in London do have? I mean, the sort of prices, Sarah quotes a couple of prices for these airspace sites in her piece. £320,000 for empty airspace in Muswell Hill, £150,000 for space for two one-bedroom apartments on top of a building in Deptford as well. it can help to alleviate some of the housing shortage. But one of the people that she spoke to, Will Vaughan from the estate agency House Collective, does also point out that not everyone wants to live in what I've described as a Frankenstein building, a Teenage Mutant Ninja apartment on the top of a apartment building already. No matter how beautifully finished it is, sometimes the context just doesn't work for these sorts of spaces as well. Interesting idea, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think I could do an entire podcast just on the buildings in London, but I love Sarah Rappaport's piece, so we'll put a link to it in our show notes for you.
Well, let's dig in then to what we learned from the latest set of tech earnings. Microsoft and Meta got different reception from their investors to their massive AI spending plans, while Samsung reported a big jump in profits for its chip unit. Our tech editor Vlad Savov is with us now for more on this. Vlad, good to talk to you. So Meta and Microsoft both announced more huge investment in AI. Why did investors respond so differently to their reports?
Well, it's a tricky one to gauge, to be honest, because the first reaction that we're looking at is still aftermarket trading. It is fairly thin, so it tends to be overstated. It tends to be overpronounced, whatever the reaction is. If you look back even just a quarter, Meta announced exactly the same thing, well, maybe not to the same scale, but a similar escalation in spending, just as it did overnight, and its share price dropped. This time, its share price went up. A lot of this is more in the way of market dynamics, but to differentiate between the two companies, Microsoft is still a little bit broader, well, significantly broader than Meta and the strategy that Mark Zuckerberg is expressing. For Meta, it's all AI. It's AI first. It's do or die. There's no plan B. So it's more of a, let's say, pure play on AI. And then you also have to consider the products that they have. Meta is building up. Mark Zuckerberg's super intelligence team is only just going to introduce these new AI models. So there's more of a mystery with Meta, whereas Microsoft's Copilot products, its integration into things like Excel and Word is already out there. And it's worth saying it isn't great. Nobody is really buying into Copilot as being a superior product than ChatGPT. In fact, most people see it as ChatGPT with some features delayed by a few months because of Microsoft's close partnership with OpenAI.
Yes, that's interesting. Meanwhile, you've got Samsung, which is on the hardware side of the equation, alongside SK Hynix and also ASML, of course, who reported yesterday, and we talked a lot about that yesterday. What did we learn, though, from Samsung out of South Korea?
Well, I mean, if you look at Samsung's profit, it is more than double the previous quarter, which was already up. You're talking record revenues, record sales and profit, both for Samsung and SK Hynix. I took a look at SK Hynix's sales. And again, when you're thinking about pure play companies, Samsung is such a diverse company and it has memory at its heart. But then SK Hynix is all about memory. And its sales have tripled, literally tripled since ChatGPT came out. So that kind of gives you a sense of the scale of demand and spending that comes from those US hyperscalers. So really, Samsung and SK Hynix reaffirmed that. They set new records. I would pay closer attention to ASML. That was the biggest surprise. I come from Europe. I'm very proud that there's a European company that plays a role in this. And ASML, the quarter four bookings that it announced were more than double analyst expectations. That's a huge surprise.
Okay, Vlad, our tech editor, thanks so much for joining us. Vlad Savov there talking us through some of those big earnings reports from both the hyperscaler side but also from the chip side as well, giving us some of a picture as to where the AI story is going from here, as we see no sign of a let-up in the spending plans from the big companies in this space as well. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Well, I want to stay with the story in Asia because the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing in an effort to broaden trade ties between the UK and China, but then without upsetting the UK's relationship with the US and President Trump. Starmer says that he wants a more sophisticated relationship between the UK and China. This gathering is still ongoing. The British Prime Minister has brought with him more than 50 executives, not just from business, but also from cultural life. Bloomberg's Jenny Marsh, who leads our coverage of Greater China's economy and government, joins us now to discuss this, give us a flavour of what's going on there. What does a more sophisticated relationship mean, do you think, Jenny? Does Keir Starmer have the ability to extract more from the economic relationship that the UK has with China?
I think he does, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here on the table for the UK in terms of financial services, and you can kind of see that from the sort of delegation that Starmer's brought with him, which is very heavy on sort of banks. And I think when he talks about sort of a more sophisticated relationship, the UK-China relationship has been sort of very swayed by politics over the past sort of 8 years, and that's led to lots of ups and downs and sort of spats about various issues. And I think, what Starmer really wants to do with this trip is sort of back to that old approach of separating the politics from the economic. We can have our differences about human rights and sort of political issues over here, and we can talk about them, but we want to focus on where the opportunity is for our economies. And I think that's what he means by this more sort of sophisticated, grown-up relationship.
Xi Jinping, though, talking about twists and turns in the UK-China relationship. It's about rising above differences, perhaps. Is there any change in China's position, given what we've heard out of the Trump White House?
I think, there was a very interesting comment that Xi made to Starmer. He said to him, "I appreciate your public statement that China presents an opportunity and engagement with China is essential." And I think that sort of sums up this trip for Xi. The UK market is already wide open to Chinese products. The trade surplus surged last year again in China's favour. But for Xi, this is sort of another leader after Carney, after South Korea's Lee, coming to Beijing, talking about the opportunity of doing business with China. And sort of, it's a real sea change from how these trips used to be, where, issues like Hong Kong or Xinjiang were sort of thorns in the relationship. And after the war in Ukraine, European leaders were saying, we cannot separate the political from the economic. We have to deal with both things. And I think this trip, shows there's been a change, partly driven by how Trump is sort of, sparring with US allies. And so for Xi, this is just great in terms of the message it sends to the world.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, "Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.